Why is Ubisoft always nerfing stuff? My F2. Ubi, please. Ubi, why? This is a conversation that I had with a fellow named Spaadez, who got on the map with a video he did critiquing Ubisoft's balancing approach, overemphasizing nerfs. Fair warning, some of the dynamics are a tiny bit weird. I tried to normalize it and compress it a little bit, but there might be a slight deviation between my voice and Spaadez' voice. We talked about the good and bad of Ubisoft's balancing design, and I think we got a lot out of the conversation, so enjoy. Okay, so Spaadez, I told you that I had a couple of questions in terms of where you were at with the balancing, because I think that there were some points that I mainly agreed with, and there were a couple that I was really curious to pick your brain about. So the first question I had for you is, what's your least favorite change that Ubisoft has done above everything else that's like representative of their, you know, particular balancing approach that you don't particularly like?
So there's two. From a personal standpoint, when they took away Mozzie's shotgun, because I was a Mozzie main, so that hurt me on a deep personal level.
That was a rough one.
The bigger and more important one would probably be season, I think it was 7, when they tried to put an end to the LMG meta, because they just flat out nerfed every single gun in the game, which I don't really feel like did anything good for the game. All it did was just a flat out across the board nerf, so it didn't make anybody better or worse than anybody else. It just made the game worse overall.
Gotcha. And then I wanted to know if you had anything that you liked that Ubisoft did.
Probably my favorite update, thinking about it, was when they made shotguns more consistent, just because that was something that everybody agreed on. It was something that everybody liked. It was just a fun update with just positives. So
I wanted to circle back on the positives about the shotguns that I thought was particularly interesting, because I noticed in the video you mentioned, like, yeah, you know, the shotgun change wasn't too bad. They ended up kind of like roundabout scaling some of that change back, right, with the laser sights. Did you remember when that took place?
Yeah, that was when they the most recent one with obviously Deadly Omen, because it doesn't affect hipfire anymore. So that was the most recent big changes to shotguns, which kind of undid the good they had already done. So.
And one of the things that I noticed about the shotgun change that was reflective of that also had to do with the fact that the shotgun pellets, this was something that I talked about when they did first do the change, the pellet spread is randomized, but they ended up giving a headshot modifier to the actual like pellet, like striking the head, which I didn't necessarily dislike, but it ended up completely changing the one-shot variability, like the one-shot capability of a lot of these shotguns at various ranges. And so that change felt strange to me, rather, I should say, because it seemed like they were looking at some data points, but then there were other data points in the noise that were very random, that didn't have much in part to do with observable patterns that you could write down. And those were fine. So, you know, randomness and, variation that's not competitively sound is not good over here, but then randomness in this kind of scenario is totally fine. And so sometimes I feel like it's very difficult to figure out what exactly Ubisoft's main approach with the game is. Also, in part, I think because a lot of those changes, as I watch your video, as you go through the video, a lot of the changes ended up going through different departments as well. And so a lot of the decisions that some people may not have liked, I don't know who was I don't know which team was responsible for the Mute Mozzie change. I believe that was 2019. Was that 2019 or 2020?
Yeah, that was, I think, 2019, 2020. Yeah, it's around then.
So as far as I understand it, that particular balance team, at least the crux of the decision making, the decision makers are not at Ubisoft Montreal working on Siege anymore. But that doesn't mean that a lot of the what that does mean is that a lot of the changes that are unpopular back in the past, even though they were done within a particular contextual set of that time frame they were working in, like 3 months, 6 months, we were dealing with the Mute Mozzie meta back then. It ends up creating a cascading effect where if a change is done at a particular moment in time, then it ends up affecting the health of the game moving forward many years down the line. And so now I feel like Mozzie could, like, I don't see why he couldn't get his shotgun back. You spent a lot of time talking about Jager's consistent nerfs with the guns. I don't see why Jager can't get a 416 buff at this point. I don't know why his gun doesn't have 30 bullets as opposed to everybody else. His assault rifle is about more difficult to use than every other option on the table, and Jager isn't even really in the meta like he used to be anymore. Everybody's playing Wamai right now.
Mm-hmm. Jager's gun is actually statistically one of the worst in the entire game. So, which is very frustrating because back in the day when he started first getting nerfed, like I said, it was focusing more on his gun when the gadget was actually the problem. So it just felt like a lot of the changes were very misguided, where they seemed afraid to shake up the meta. So they're doing everything in their power to try to avoid doing that. But what it ended up doing was just creating another gun that sucks. When a better alternative, in my opinion, would have been to have swapped his gun with somebody else.
I agree completely. I think that you could have... there was a point with the Jager stuff where it felt like they were trying to turn him into a sight anchor, you know, because they kept attacking his gun like over and over again. And I was just like, okay, dude, like if you don't want him to be an effective gunfighter, because we were still back in, a much more rapid paced gunfighting meta back then, at least not in, on paper anyway, there was a lot more utility, but the actual speed of the mechanics were faster. If you really wanted to do that, then you could have just made him into a sight anchor, just make him into a freaking 3 armor and give him like a crappy SMG with a scope on it or something. So that way, if you still have like mechanical aim that's decent, you can still win a gunfight or two.
Yeah, because back in the day, me and my friends kept saying, well, why don't they trade Castle and Jager's gun? Because they were constantly nerfing Jager's gun. Meanwhile, Castle was just drowning in the back of the pack. So it's like, okay, well, the UMP is considered one of the worst guns in the game. Nobody's going to give up playing Jager. So the only way you're going to do this is by radically changing him. Not these little incremental changes, like make his gun a little worse here, then a little worse here. Just a sudden rapid change to shake up the player base. That's the only way you're going to make changes like that.
I agree with that philosophy. Next question. So all that being said, how do you think Ubisoft can improve their current approach as opposed to what they are doing right now?
So like I mentioned in the video, focusing more on practicality, like how people actually play the game. Because they want people to have this very slow, deliberate way to play the game, a very gadget-focused, utility-focused way to play. But the majority of the player base is going against that by just running around like it's Call of Duty.
Yeah.
So if they want people to actually use the gadgets more, they need to make that more fun, because the people are going to use whatever is fun.
I think it's a very tricky position that Ubisoft is in, because they spent a very long time trying to market a game that had a particular kind of aesthetic and artistic slant that was supposed to look and at least, feel a little bit more authentic. Now, I know that, the commonly cited E3 trailer that gets talked about quite a bit, you go through that and then you see the comments just like, I wish this game was still around. In some ways, that game was playable as it released back in 2015, back in 2016, but anybody who was like stacking up on top of each other by a door was probably just gonna get like bolo peeked by a 16-year-old, like Adderalled out, right? Probably get like a triple C4 kill or something. And what ended up happening is, I think that at the time, the game was not prepared to take the influx of multiplayer like cracked out shooter kids. I don't think people really understood what players were capable of in terms of taking the sandbox that they created and then extrapolating it into, whatever it ended up becoming. And so in that sense, Siege kind of ended up becoming a victim of circumstance where it had a particular kind of approach that it wanted to have with its marketing, like tactical dude, like, over and out Oscar Mike, like, slow, deliberate, like playing off of teammates, communicating, gathering information before making a decision, yada, yada, yada. And then the most efficient way to end up playing the game is actually the gunfight bolo cracked MLG Pro. And that ended up happening a long time after the fact that they removed so many utility aspects in terms of how much headspace it took in the gaming collective consciousness, whatever you want to call it. The meta was to stack a bunch of util, to your point in the video where you said Jager's problem was not the gun, it was the gadget. I agreed. I remember actually covering it pretty extensively. I noticed that you included a bit from somebody who had similar things to say a long time ago. Kind of looks like me. I don't really know what he was.
Yeah, I don't know who that was.
Yeah, the only thing that Ubisoft could do was eventually just pull the trigger on the actual design approach and say, we don't want a like fast-paced Call of Duty shooter. So we're gonna do a number of different things, and that's what they ended up doing over the course of many years. They ended up slowing down the actual pacing of the gunfight again and again, and the gunfighting again and again and again. I think that those changes are reflective of a version of Siege that they would like to see on paper, but it's not necessarily reflected in practice. They might be, playing these games with internal sessions among one another and say, oh yeah, this slower kind of gunfighting feels more tactical, feels like slower, feels more strategic, but the experience that players are having right now isn't reflective of that, right? Everybody's talking about the TDM meta right now, even though the game is like 5 million times slower than it used to be.
Mm. Well, the reason why that is because the thing they seem to keep avoiding or trying to ignore is that one thing that they cannot change and will just always be effective is just being very good at shooting. Like they can change the gadgets, they can rework that, but shooting will always be just definitively a good thing.
Well, that's how you win the round, right? I mean, you kill all the other guys and win the round. That's the fastest way to do it.
Yeah, and that's just because you can pick the wrong gadget, you can bring the wrong operator, and then you end up being screwed. But if you pick somebody who just has a good gun, that's just always going to be applicable.
I don't know how you felt about Solus, like in terms of her power level. I guess where would you say she was before her big nerf?
She was definitely very strong, but I do think the nerf kind of went a bit too far.
Yeah, I think that just taking away the ability to see it in the prep phase, that was probably just all you really needed,
Yeah, like just that way you can actually get drones to the map and into position without instantly getting taken out. And
on top of that, they did something which I'm never a fan of when they do it. And I am a fan when they do the opposite of this. When they have a character design, and then there's a certain aspect about the gadgetry interplay where you have a unique gameplay loop onto that character that is granted through the gadget. And Solus being able to use her impact grenades, right, to make plays based off of her scanner, that was a gameplay loop that was solely unique to Solus, right? Because nobody else can get on a scanner and then make a play with the impact based off of the information you get, right? It's like the Pulse C4 kind of analogy.
Yeah.
And there were a lot of examples in the past where Ubisoft has done that, where they're like, oh, but if it's too much, they can't be self-sufficient. Then why'd you make them self-sufficient?
The most egregious one for me is Maverick, because one of the most fun gameplay loops that me and my friends used to have back in the day is the way we would get walls open was we'd put a little hole at the top with Maverick. I'd throw the grenade through as Mav. Then, we'd either try to get, that's how we get the bandit batteries or the Cade off the wall. And it was great because there was all this counterplay where, okay, they brought out a Jager, so we'd have to throw a flash through the hole, then time the grenade with a thermite charge. Or, okay, now they're tricking back through the hole to try to get it off the wall. Or the guy's just really good at bandit tricking. There's like all these different unique aspects to this that can play out. Yeah, but now none of that happens because, well, Maverick doesn't have frag grenades anymore. Well, now impacts aren't big enough to impact trick off the wall anymore. So, yeah, you can't do that. Gameplay loop is just completely gone now.
Yeah, and there's gameplay loops that you remember and really enjoyed playing like 3-4 years ago that you just never get to do again.
And literally impossible.
But to your point about the Maverick example, Goga, right? I don't know if you followed much Pro League around that era.
I have literally never watched a single game of Pro League.
Goga was the guy. He was the G2 guy. He was a fantastic support player, and like he was one of the guys that was really responsible for getting that gameplay loop, a lot of notoriety, because people were noticing like these gameplay loops and seeing them firsthand in the competitive scene, because who's going to be min-maxing and who's going to be, doing all these different moving parts, right? The competitive scene is going to be interfacing with that the most, so they're going to have more trial runs, or test runs, you could say, for the sake of experimental design. That gameplay loop that you described, ended up, getting popularized by the competitive scene. And so when that gameplay loop got removed, I think that, people have a tendency to say like, oh, well, it was the competitive scene, that takes like a lot of the fun out of the game. A lot of the competitive players, when changes like that do take place, they get irritated about it too, because they're like, well, this was like an interesting component of the game, and now I can't do that anymore. And it's not even necessarily because like, I'm good at the strategy, like we want to win more matches. But I also think that it's really important for Rainbow Six Siege to lean into its mechanics, not try to take away playmaking opportunities, because if you take away playmaking opportunities, then it is just, Call of Duty with drones and cameras and, a couple other things.
Well,
yeah.
Because I think one issue they've been actually having with that is that they really don't seem to like versatility. Because I mentioned this with, again, the Maverick thing I just brought up, with Mute being able to roam or anchor. They don't seem to like versatility, but the problem with that is that when you try to force every single operator into one little neat box, it means that only a few of them who are the most versatile will actually get played.
Yes. Yeah. Simple statistical frameworks there. That's how that's going to shake out.
Yeah, that's why Ashe is still the most popular and will always be the most popular, because an explosive is just always useful. Her gadget's just always going to be useful.
Do you know much? Do you follow sports? Do you watch much?
Used to back in the day.
Like football, baseball?
Yeah.
Okay. So one of the ways that we talk about it, I guess, in sports betting is floor versus ceiling. And those were terms that I tried to kind of like throw around when I talked about balancing a little bit, and that ended up confusing a ton of people. But I think you seem like you would pick up on it pretty quickly. The idea of having like Ashe being would be a character with a high floor. A floor is basically like your guaranteed value. So for example, like Frank Gore, before he retired was guaranteed to get the ball through, like his job in the latter end of his career was to get the ball through this, the giant freaking defensive line and basically just like brute force that crap over the first down marker, right? Like that was his job. That running back's job is to punch hole that first down every single time. They're not going to like break free and run for like 1,000,000 yards and get like Saquon Barkley, 80 yards rushing and 2 touchdowns or something crazy like that, but they're going to get the first down. And so that's an example of a guaranteed floor without a ceiling that's particularly high. Saquon or McCaffrey will give you that, crazy, statistically, transcendentally, outlandishly great kind of figure where they're just going to, run and then get 3 touchdowns in one game. But Frank Gore is going to get you that floor. Hey, look at me, all right. And so Ashe is kind of a similar example, especially in operator and character-based games. I think a lot of these developers don't really calculate, like, why are people picking the operator? Why are people playing the character? Are they playing them because they're overpowered, or are they playing them because they're not going to lose anything by playing them? Potentially lose anything. Yeah,
no, because I mean, just thinking about that, like I'm looking at the win rate delta right now for consoles, which is just horrific. But I'm looking at specifically like Maestro. It's like bring Maestro, like he could have a pretty high ceiling, like he could be very valuable to your team. But also, it's really easy for a Brava to steal his cams and completely screw you over.
Right.
So it's like, well, do we want to take the risk? It's like, no, I'll just bring somebody like Goyo, because his cans can't get stolen, so who cares?
Fair point. We're getting towards the end here. I guess I wanted to talk a little bit, get this talking point in about the actual mechanical movement, the leaning, the speed, right? Where are you at on that? Because I couldn't really get a sense of what kind of like pacing of gunfighting you may have like particularly wanted out of Siege. Do you think that Ubisoft should be leaning a little bit more into the slow stuff, or do you think that the faster paced era, like bolo peaking, not necessarily bolo peaking, that doesn't have to be representative of what they should do, but I'm curious as to where you are on the spectrum for that.
So it's not necessarily that there's like one particular speed for everything, but because looking at it back in the day, trying to think when it was, but basically before they did like the first like major ADS nerf, because it was when bolo peeking had already been taken out of the game. You couldn't peek as quickly. Like, I don't have a problem with that, but it's mostly the ADS speed being the main thing for me, because it just makes the game feel so clunky. Because when you see a guy run around a corner suddenly, the idea is that, well, the person who's always prepared is the one who deserves to win the fight. But like, there are so many instances where you're surprised in this game, and not being able to quickly get your gun up is so frustrating. Like in the game, or in the video I made, like literally I got so many examples of me just hip-fire headshotting someone before I even got the gun up, because it's just spraying and praying. And the bolo peeking is one thing, but having too slow of ADS leads to frustration in other ways.
So you want a little bit more reactive gunplay is what I'm hearing.
I'm biased because my favorite game is Titanfall 2. But
that's fair.
It doesn't need to be that. It doesn't need to be that, obviously.
Nothing wrong with a little bit of Titanfall.
It's just that when every single aspect is slower, there's nothing that really stands out. So, because there are certain, at least the one thing you could rely on was being able to quickly ADS. So you can lean as fast, you can vault everything as fast, whatever. I don't really have a problem with that, but because that doesn't make the game feel too clunky, and I can see a good reason why that needed to be changed. because bolo peeking was very frustrating. You're getting shot and you literally can't see the guy. But when you see the guy and you're just spraying at him and praying, that is very frustrating and doesn't feel good at all.
What do you think of a stamina system? What do you think of that?
I think it could be good because, yeah, specifically like the ADS speed. Or would that apply for ADS speed? I guess if you wanted it to.
If you kept like going back and forth, I guess like right click spamming, then it would like stop. Yeah, it would like slow you down and be like, hey, chill.
Yeah, I mean, because the main thing with the stamina system is with the leaning and the crouching, because obviously manipulating your hitbox to be as hard as possible can be very frustrating. ADS speed wise, I don't know how necessarily that will. I guess that will work out because if you're walking around the map, you're not ADS because you're trying to get a good field of view, and then you just very quickly need to snap onto somebody. Yeah, it's fine. But obviously, if you're trying to quick peek literally everything and you're, can't keep track of you, then yeah, I can see why that would make sense to have a stamina system in that case.
Okay. I don't know what the answer is, Spades. I think that ultimately it's, unfortunately a bit out of our hands. I wish I could, reach my hand down into Ubisoft, Montreal and just, like micromanage people around. But that's, unfortunately not the case. Some people, I believe, think that content creators have the ability to do that. Believe it or not, we don't. It's strange to think, I know. And yeah, I'm not up there like the White House, press junket, right? Like I can ask them whatever they are comfortable with me asking them, and then that's what I get. They're very transparent with what they want to be transparent about, and everything else is like, nope, gotta have your Ubisoft security clearance for that. And I'm like, okay, I am not high enough to get that.
It is a little frustrating. I understand why they don't want to reach out to the community more, because they said that, or was it you who said that, or was that them who said it specifically, that they were afraid to put out too many posts because all the feedback they get is just so negative.
Yeah, they told me that. They said, straight to me. And it was all available for the public, so they don't care about me saying it, but they said, yeah, like we considered cutting off a lot of our community outreach stuff on social media because we can't get any feedback that's useful. The feedback that we get, online is not reflected in what we're seeing in the data. And that's true. I think that there's a lot of companies that are going through a similar kind of problem. But at the same time, I don't think that, it's a good habit to think, well, everybody who is approaching this, this group of people has a lot of people that are approaching it in good faith. So therefore, nobody is approaching it in good faith. I think, your video was approaching it in good faith.
Yeah, I know. Some of the comments didn't believe that, but I did at one point genuinely love this game. I didn't put 3,000 hours into it, 3,800 hours into it because I hated it,
Yeah, no, I agree.
I've played it for
nobody does it. Nobody does that unless they like it. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. It's like I do genuinely want the game to improve. It's just that it feels like in the past few years, and based on the sentiment with the video, a lot of the community doesn't feel like they're being listened to. So, and that frustration builds up. And I think with the limited community posts, every time they send something out, they just get this massive backlash because they only say something every once in a while.
Right.
So when that happens, everybody needs to explode on it.
Yeah, exactly. This is my chance.
Pretty much.
Bring back the shotgun. Do it.
Yeah, I think if you had either some sort of more consistent communication and obviously the clearer you are with the community, I think the better it will be. But also, it does feel like a lot of times they say they're listening, and I don't know, you've talked to them, but from the community standpoint, it doesn't always feel like we're being listened to.
Right.
The only time I feel like we actually got listened to was with the smoke change when they were going to make it so he can't walk through his gas, and the backlash was so bad, they had to change that.
And I'll take... I think I'm allowed to take a little bit of credit for that because I was one of the first people. I was very vocal about that, and I had a banger thumbnail that worked there with Smoke in his own smoke taking like RuneScape damage, and I don't know if anybody there saw that video and they were like, but I'm just saying, I don't know, man.
Yeah, but they also didn't listen to things like the buck frag grenades or the frost change.
Right.
I don't actually mind the frost change, but I know a lot of people hate it. Or like how the battle pass or the membership, which they got booed again in person. But
what do you mean? I love the membership. Speaking of, if you like this video, be sure to check out No, I'm kidding.
Yeah.
Why does no one like the membership? I can't imagine. Dude, Spades, we're right at the cutoff here. Actually, we're a little bit over. But yeah, I'll cut the feed as you say there, unless you have anything else you wanted to add.
No, it's all good with me.
Okie dokie. So that was the convo. A lot of fat trimmed here to keep it a little bit more manageable and to cut down on my rambling tendency, which I do. I try to be better about it. I'm not perfect. But yeah, I think that this was a good conversation. I didn't necessarily agree with every single little bullet point that the guy had in his video, but as you can tell, I think that we managed to get to common ground in terms of where we think we would like Ubisoft to go. And the overall direction of the game really just needs to be incentivized. I think that Ubisoft needs to provide incentives to interface with the game in the way that they would like it to be interfaced with. We don't necessarily think that it should be done at the expense of the gunfighting completely, because the gunfighting is an integral part of the game. And you're never going to get rid of that. So I do like characters like Brava. I do like characters like Grim, even with a little interaction with the bailiff and the bees that you can shoot through the bailiff holes that you make in the destructible walls. Spaadez, I think, has an interesting point to make about how people practically play the game. If they don't play the game in the slow kind of tactical way that you want them to, it's probably because they're not being given options in order to do that, rather than, you know, all of them are just morons who aren't capable of playing the game in a smart, you know, correct way. So that was ultimately where I went with that. I will leave a link to Spaadez' channel in the description. Please go check it out. He was nice enough to join my program, you could say, and yap it up with me and help me get some content for my channel. And it is fair for you to also help him a little bit and give him your support, because he supported me with this video. So thank you, Spaadez, and thank you for watching this video. I'll see you guys in the next one, okay? Thanks so much. Deuces.